One of the lessons I've learned as a journalist is that when news gets very chaotic, it's important to go back to basics. And that's what we're going to do today, talking about what happened in Washington, D.C. at the U.S. Capitol. It's been a day that's been historic in many different ways. And I have to be honest with you, in some ways, I'm a little bit at a loss for words. One of the big headlines that we saw this afternoon is protesters breached the U.S. Capitol. And then the question is, of course, are they protesters if they breach the U.S. Capitol? Is that the correct words to accurately describe what took place? So I'm struggling a little bit with that. I'm not quite sure exactly what the right call is. And we're still learning a lot about what exactly took place. What's remarkable about this day is that the U.S. Capitol has live cameras. And so I was actually watching C-SPAN at the time, watching the joint session of Congress, just to set the stage. Remember, the joint session of Congress was happening because lawmakers have gathered. They're going to count the Electoral College votes. There's going to be objections in a way that we haven't seen as a nation in forever, really since 1877. We've never seen objections in this capacity, in this sort of way to the Electoral College. So we knew this day was going to be notable. C-SPAN has a live feed. So as I'm watching this live feed, in the middle of an objection taking place. So what happened is they were at the very beginning of the alphabet, the state of Arizona, and there was an objection to the Electoral College votes in the state of Arizona. So the Senate goes back to its chambers, the House of Representatives is where it meets, and now they get to debate. They have to debate for up to 2 hours. They have a limitation, and they get a few minutes here and there. Republican talks, Democrat talks, Republican talks, Democrat talks. And this is what we were watching. And then all of a sudden, the tone and the tenor of the room changed. And suddenly, there was a recess at the U.S. Capitol. And at that moment, protesters had come into the U.S. Capitol. But in order to understand what actually took place, I pulled up some maps, because if you haven't been to Washington, D.C., and not for nothing, listen, I was raised in San Francisco, California. Washington, D.C. was really far away. I didn't go to Washington, D.C. until I was an adult. And really, just in the recent years, have I spent any significant time down there. And so if you haven't been there, I just want to show you, because you see a lot of this on television, right? I just want to show you what this all looks like, because I think getting situated will be helpful for what I tell you next, which is I was able to speak to someone who was at the rally, and the morning rally, and was able to go over to the U.S. Capitol and witness what was taking place there. And I want to share his thoughts and his observations, because you're getting a lot on social media, but this is a firsthand account. So I also want to share that with you. Okay, so let me show you this, okay? Here is our handy map of the center of Washington, D.C., of the White House here, Washington Monument down here, and U.S. Capitol is over here. Here's the famous Pennsylvania Avenue. And so what you should know is that there was a rally, event, speakers, the whole thing. We know President Trump's been talking about this day, which we'll get to in a little bit. But there was people gathered here. Apparently they walked down Pennsylvania Avenue after noon Eastern time, and they wind up at the U.S. Capitol. So here's what's important to know about the U.S. Capitol. Let me go and pull this up. The U.S. Capitol is a really big area. This is a huge building. It's also quite elevated, lots of stairs. So it's not like you can just walk in from street level. Certainly not. Security is always very visible in this area. Also really important to know here is that if you walk in the doors, you're not suddenly into the House of Representatives chambers or where the Senate meets. There's a bunch of, hallways and mazes. And for the people that work there, congressional aides that know this like the back of their hand, I'm always so impressed, because it's easy to get lost, which makes the fact that protesters, see there, I don't know if that's the correct word, were able to enter the building and get to the chambers very significant. It's not like walking into an Apple store, and everything's right in front of you. It's very different than that. And so it really kind of hits home what a significant security breach this is. So let's just go to the who, what, where, when, how, and why. We know that this event was going to be taking place. President Trump has been talking about it for weeks. There's an insinuation that perhaps he knew that this was going to take place, this sort of violence and upheaval at the U.S. Capitol. Here's what President Trump said at the rally when he spoke. I want to read this to you. After this, the rally. We're going to walk down there and I'll be with you. We're going to walk down to the Capitol and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women. And we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength. You have to be strong. So that's what the president said earlier today. So what was it like at the rally? I was able to speak to someone that was there. And my first question for him, of course, was why? Why did he decide to go there today? What was he interested in? For him, he says it was about election integrity. He does feel like there should be more investigation into the election process. And he said he's not specifically a Trump supporter, but this is an issue that's very important to him. So that's why he decided to go. One of the things that stands out about his description of the event, he said there was a ton of people. Initially, he didn't know how big the crowd was, but as he was able to kind of take in what was going on about midday, there were a lot of people. And they were able to go down to Pennsylvania Avenue to the U.S. Capitol. And I said, was this planned? Did you know that this was going to take place? Was there rumors in the crowd about what was going on? And he said, no. That's not that he didn't know. There was murmurs in the crowd. Okay, we're going to walk down to Pennsylvania Avenue to the U.S. Capitol. He said, but other than that, the crowd was peaceful. He said that he was shocked at how many families were there. Families with babies, strollers, elderly people in carts. He said, this was the tone of the crowd, and that people were very cordial. He said he was very impressed by the police. Everyone was, he felt, behaving. When they got to the U.S. Capitol, he said that there was this moment where you started to hear someone on a bullhorn encourage people to go in closer to the Capitol. He, of course, was not one of them, and he stood back and watched this event. He said one of the interesting things as he was reflecting on the day is that if you were outside the Capitol, even though you were part of the crowd, because of the fact that many times you're looking up to the Capitol, you can't see someone go in the building. So he said there is a likelihood that people could be close to what was going on and not actually know people were getting inside the building. And he said there was a lot of confusion. People were sort of standing around, didn't really know what was going on. At a certain point, the crowd started to push forward. He said he was about 200 yards back. And he said it was very obvious how little police presence there was. He said it was clearly that the police and the Capitol Hill police, he said he saw some people in riot gear, that they were outnumbered. So that was his big observation. Let me go ahead and look through my notes a little bit on this. He said also, getting back to the Capitol, he said that there was a difference of tone. He said he walked around the Capitol several times. So he said, depending on whether or not you were in the front or the back or where you were in the building, he said the crowds almost had different personalities. And at a certain point, it was very obvious that one side was getting more rowdy than the other side, and that there was a loss of control, that there was a loss of control. That was his feeling about it. I asked him, I said, what are your thoughts now that you know what happened? Because now at the end of the day, so remember, this started to take place. He said that really when he got to the U.S. Capitol, the crowd started to get more aggressive around 1:15 Eastern time. And we saw about 2 o'clock Eastern time is when the House went into recess. So it was over that 45-minute period. In this time period, there was a lot of chaos, and a woman was shot. The exact situation that transpired that led to the shooting, we don't even know, but we do know that she died. So that gives us the gravity of the situation, right? So who are these people that got into the building? Who are they? Who have been arrested? We don't know that. We don't know any of that right now. The last report I saw was 13 arrests. 13. How many people got in the building? We don't know. No idea. I don't even have a crowd number for the number of people that actually gathered in Washington, D.C. So you're who, what, where, when, how, and why. Some of these very basic questions that I want to go back to, I can't even fill in some of the blanks yet. So I think it's important to know that. I did speak with my father-in-law, who is a congressman, who we talked about yesterday on a very controversial topic because he is objecting to the Electoral College votes. And a lot of you had a lot of really strong opinions about that. And I talked to him. I was able to reach him. All the lawmakers were evacuated. They can't even discuss how they were evacuated because of security concerns. They were evacuated. And I said, well, what do you think this means, for the joint session of Congress that has to take place to certify the Electoral College votes? This is an important final chapter in the 2020 election. How is this affected? And do you still think that the objection makes sense considering what we've seen? And so Congressman Babin said that he wanted the joint session to continue and that he would continue to object. But he also said that there was a question about whether or not Republican senators, would follow along. This is really key because remember, for objections to actually go through, you need a member from the House and a member from the Senate, and you got to have both, otherwise you can't object. Going back a couple of years, there were Democrats that objected when President Trump was elected. And they cited Russian interference and voter suppression. But guess what? They didn't have anyone in the Senate. So they couldn't go further. So even though the Democrats objected, it didn't go anywhere. You probably didn't even hear about it, right? Because there's no one in the Senate. So we just learned from Nancy Pelosi, the House Speaker, that they are going to go back in session. They want to go back in session tonight. There are 2 hours of debate for every single state where there's an objection. So the question is, when do they go back in session? Do the objections still happen? If they do happen, it could be a 24-hour session. So, how does this all work out? I'm not sure is the answer. I'm not exactly sure. But according to one of my former colleagues and a good friend of mine, Chad Pergram, who is an amazing journalist, historian, who's worked on Capitol Hill for decades. He's amazing. If you guys can follow him on Twitter or read his articles, you need to. He really knows his stuff. Very dedicated journalist. He said that what needs to transpire here for the Electoral College is this process has to take place in 5 days. It has to take place in 5 days. Otherwise, we've never not done that. So let's just hold off. Now, I don't like to get into hypothetics, okay? I don't. But it's hard not to in this situation. Democrat lawmakers are coming out with very strong criticism, of course, of President Trump. By the way, President Trump has tweeted about this event. His tweets have been removed by Twitter for their censorship. I don't know what you call them. What do you call them? Because they didn't meet their requirements. Let's pull it up right now. I have it right now. And I'll tell you exactly what the wording is. Because basically they're saying that President Trump is still instigating this behavior. And that's their call. So that's what they're saying now. I'm going to pull it up for you right now. But you're hearing, because you're going to hear this, I feel like it's important that we talk about it. And then I'll take some of your questions. Let's stop talking. Democrat lawmakers are calling for impeachment. Apparently, some are drawing up impeachment papers. Remember, the House of Representatives can impeach a president. Democrats have majority there. But you have to have a trial in the Senate. The Senate decides whether or not to remove a president. So it's not just something that can be an up and down vote in an evening. So you're hearing that. This other thing that you're hearing is the 25th Amendment. Some Democrat lawmakers are saying that Republicans, including the vice president, who would have to do this, should invoke the 25th. The person that's calling me actually works with me at Smarter News, which is really funny. See, we're all just trying to hustle as best as we can. The 25th Amendment came out after the assassination of JFK, because it was a question about succession. And what can happen in the 25th Amendment is the vice president, along with members of the cabinet, can say that a president is unfit for office and remove him. That's what's being requested by some Democrat lawmakers. It's never been used before. You should also know that. There's a lot of emotion bubbling up. I'm doing my best just to keep it just the basics of what you need to know. So I hope this is helpful. I thought it was really helpful to speak to someone who was there. And I asked him, I said, what do you think about all this? You came down because this was a really important issue for you, election integrity. You still think it's an important issue. What do you think? You wish you didn't go? What do you think? And he said, what I feel right now is disappointment. He said, I think this is an important issue. Election integrity is an important issue. He's like, but I wasn't there because of the president. I was there because of the issue. And now I feel like this issue won't get any attention. And that's what's really important to him. So, when I see terms like Trump supporters as a description of the crowd, one of the things he said is He said that's not why he was there. So listen, this is hard. Like I said, it's hard to find the right words for this. All right, guys, what can I help with? What can I help with? It's a big question, right? Everything? Your laundry? Like at this point, what do you guys think? Let me go ahead and check while you're thinking of your questions. I'm pulling up President Trump's Twitter feed. This tweet is no longer available. So the president tweeted out and also put out a video about keeping things peaceful. In the video that he put out, though, he also talked about a stolen election. And so that tweet was removed. It's quite a standoff, isn't it, between the president of the United States and social media companies at a time of an emergency. Washington, D.C. is under curfew. Curfew went into effect 6 p.m. Everyone's supposed to be home. Curfew ends 6 a.m. Let me see if I have an update for you about when everyone's going back into session. It's going to be an all-nighter if they do. One of the things that Chad, again, going back to one of my trusted friends, said is that it was a little bit of a mess inside the chamber. You know, we have to remember it's also a pandemic. All these things are taking place. So there was a question about how quickly they can turn this around. Mrs. Katie Brooks, Smarter News is my first stop. Thank you. I appreciate that. So Lanny was asking, how does the 25th Amendment come into play? We don't know. Lawmakers are they're taking to social media. They're almost having a stream of consciousness conversation about what they think should take place from this point. I'm not saying they're not serious about it, but there's a lot of hypothetics that are being floated because these are the two that I saw the most mentioned by Democrat lawmakers. I wanted you to know about it. The 25th Amendment can be chosen to be invoked by the vice president and members of the president's cabinet. So there you go. Why would you impeach someone so close to the transfer of power is the question. I think there is a debate amongst lawmakers, obvious critics of the president, that his behavior up until this event and some of his comments today that some, including the social media companies, view as instigating violence are criminal. I mean, that's what they're basically saying, which is why they are saying he's unfit to be president. And so impeachment exists for that reason, right? That the House can vote to impeach a president. That doesn't remove him. The Senate then has to come over. It's one way of the process. That's also something I think that's a little bit lost in this. While the Electoral College objections are rare, the reason why we even have this process in place is because lawmakers in the past saw that it could happen. So one of the observations watching the event before all of this chaos took place was I thought, wow, how orderly everyone's being. There's a process for this. The debate is happening back and forth. It's going on. But what transpired wasn't orderly. Let's see. Any other questions I can answer for you guys? I'm sure there's going to be a million more over the next several hours. Oh, you guys are asking me. So Chad Pergram, Pergram. He now works for Fox News. He's worked for them for several years. I'm reading his bio. He won the Edward R. Murrow Famous Journalist Award. I mean, Chad is respected by everybody. When I say, listen to me, when I say he's respected by everybody, he's respected by everybody. He's an amazing guy. And he knows what's up. So you gotta listen to Chad. Worst case scenario, what could come from all of this? That's a great question. What are we talking about? Immediate effects or long-term effects, right? Guys, I'm going to tell you something. I'm grateful for you. I know this is crazy. How did the rioters get into the Capitol building? Excellent question. Excellent question. Security at the U.S. Capitol is tight. You have to go through metal detectors. There is scaffolding, though, and we don't know is the answer exactly which doors they entered, how many doors they entered at one time. But there wasn't enough security to hold them back. But it's a great question. I don't know. Why was security not prepared? Emily's asking. This is also a great question. I did ask someone that was there. I talked to a couple people that were there, and they just said, he didn't think that they weren't prepared. He felt at the beginning they were showing restraint because they didn't want to cause a conflict and then quickly got overwhelmed. That was his take on it. I'm sure there's a lot of different opinions. Yes, Laura, you're asking a great question. How did this just suddenly go from something to nothing, or nothing to something? Pardon me. How did it go from what seemed to be not an aggressive crowd to suddenly very aggressive and violent? If anyone, you've probably been to protests before, rallies before, or big social events, you probably will know that sometimes the tone just changes like that. So that's, I'm only speculating at this point, but could there be people? Yeah, this is a question. So Janny, could there have been people from the other side among this group? So there's some, again, people speculating on social media that who was really a part of this group. Could this be, Antifa? Are these professionals? Like, who are these people that decided to go into the U.S. Capitol? We don't know who the arrests are. We don't know anything about them. We don't. We know that there was a rally held in support of President Trump, and it stopped the steal. Those that believe that the election was stolen, the 2020 election was stolen. All right, guys. I really appreciate all of this. I'm sorry I can't get to most of your comments. I could sit here all day, honestly, with you guys and just go through them. I'd love to be able to set some time apart to do that. I wish I had more answers for you at this exact moment. I will put in the caption of this video how to follow Chad. I don't think he has an Instagram account. I should text him about that. Maybe not today. Probably will give him a little bit of a break. How do we determine if protesters that breached the Capitol were actually Trump supporters? Well, some of them got arrested, so we'll find out exactly who they are. Let's see what else. Megan, excellent question, Megan. I'm assuming you mean lawmakers, can they continue to meet virtually to finish? Yes, they don't have to meet at the U.S. Capitol, apparently. So, is the U.S. Capitol at this moment, so 6:45 Central Time, is it clear of protesters? It's our understanding that it is clear of protesters, and that's why lawmakers would be able to resume their job. All right. I hope this is helpful. Really glad that you guys are here. We got to take care of each other, and I know sometimes it's frustrating. Life is frustrating. I really appreciate your respect for nonpartisan news. I know it's a time that we're all looking for a lot of validation in chaos, right? We all want to feel validated. I do too. But I'm hopeful that Smarter News can just provide for you the basics, who, what, where, when, how, why, the foundation beneath your feet. Then you can start listening to the opinions, as you should, because it's a free country. Listen to the opinions and then make up your own mind. So I just want to make sure that you have a little something to go on today, okay? All right, I'm gonna try to put captions on this video. I know it's longer than normal, but I think that's important. And keep sending in your questions. You know what we should do? Let's do this tomorrow. Keep sending in your questions. You can DM me on Instagram. You can send them in on hello@smarternews.com. And let's do a Q&A. Let's do a Q&A tomorrow. I think that would actually be the most helpful, right? Then I can go and find the answers for you and report back. All right, deal? Okay, good. Have a great night. I'll keep you updated here and appreciate you guys always. Bye.